The 1970s changed what a movie soundtrack could be. Songs stopped being background. They became the story. They sold more records than the films themselves. They lived in your head for years after the lights came up, and some of them are still playing on radio 50 years later. Here are the 15 most popular movie songs from the 1970s you must hear again. Number 15. If You Want to Sing Out, Sing Out by Cat Stevens, Harold and Maude, 1971.
Well, if you want to sing out, sing out. And if you want...
Harold and Maude was directed by Hal Ashby and told the story of an unlikely friendship between a morbid young man and an 80-year-old woman who embraces life completely. The film was a commercial disappointment on its initial release in 1971, but through midnight screenings became one of the most beloved cult films in American cinema history.
There's a million things to be, you know that there are.
Cat Stevens wrote 2 original songs for the film, If You Want to Sing Out, and Don't Be Shy. Both were recorded for Harold and Maude and did not appear on any Cat Stevens album until years later. If You Want to Sing Out is a short, direct piece of encouragement, an insistence that the way through life is to do the thing you want to do without waiting for permission. In a film about a young man learning to choose life over his fascination with death, it functioned as the thesis statement. Cat Stevens converted to Islam in 1977 and withdrew from the music industry. If You Want to Sing Out received one of its most prominent later placements in the 2009 Wes Anderson film Fantastic Mr. Fox, introducing it to a new generation who then found their way back to Harold and Maude.
And if you want to be free, be free. 'Cause as a man...
Number 14. The music for Robert Altman's MASH, the darkly comic film about a mobile army surgical hospital during the Korean War, required a theme song that could be played during a mock ceremonial suicide by a dentist named Walt Waldowski, performed by a military band while the cast watched. The song needed to seem genuinely, earnestly sentimental, while the entire situation undercut any possibility of taking it seriously.
A brave man once requested me.
Composer Johnny Mandel wrote the melody. The lyrics were written by 14-year-old Mike Altman, the director's son. Robert Altman has said in interviews that he himself tried to write lyrics and couldn't manage anything that met the brief. His teenage son did it in 15 minutes. The younger Altman reportedly earned over $1 million in songwriter royalties from the song, considerably more than his father's director's fee of $70,000 for the film. The song became the theme of the MASH television series, which ran from 1972 to 1983, and became one of the most watched programs in American television history. The series finale in 1983 drew over 100 million viewers, still the most watched television broadcast in history at the time, and one that holds its record for the most watched scripted program ever.
Doesn't hurt when it begins.
Number 13. The Time Warp, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, 1975. The Rocky Horror Picture Show opened in September 1975. To limited distribution and mediocre initial reception. Through midnight screenings, it developed a cult following that eventually made it the longest-running theatrical release in cinema history. The participatory ritual, audiences dressing as characters, shouting responses at the screen, throwing toast and rice, created an experience unlike anything else the film industry had produced. The Time Warp was written by Richard O'Brien, who also wrote the original stage musical the film was based on. The song is a party number that functions as its own instruction manual. It teaches you how to do the dance while you are listening to it, which is why it has remained accessible to audiences who have never seen the show. The film is still screened at midnight showings around the world, 50 years after its release.
You're into the time slip.
And no.
Number 12. Summer Nights by Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta, Grease, 1978. Grease opened in June 1978 and became one of the highest-grossing films of the year. The soundtrack sold approximately 28 million copies worldwide and spent 12 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard 200. The chemistry between Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta, who had become a major star the previous year through Saturday Night Fever, drove the film's enormous audience. Summer Nights opens the film's narrative, with Danny and Sandy simultaneously telling their separate versions of their summer romance to their respective friend groups, his version considerably more embellished than hers. The song establishes the film's central tension: two people who had a genuine connection, who are now performing different versions of themselves in front of their friends. Olivia Newton-John had been hesitant to take the Sandy role and arranged a screen test with Travolta before committing. The chemistry was immediately evident. She won a People's Choice Award for her performance. Number 11. Rainbow Connection by Kermit the Frog, Jim Henson, The Muppet Movie, 1979. The Muppet Movie was the first theatrical feature film featuring Jim Henson's characters, and it opened in June 1979 to immediate commercial and critical success. The film's structure was built around the conceit of Kermit the Frog leaving his swamp in Louisiana to travel to Hollywood and pursue his dream of making people happy, assembling his friends along the way.
All of us under its spell.
Rainbow Connection opens the film. Kermit alone in his swamp, sitting on a log, playing a banjo, singing about dreamers and the things they believe in, and the sense that the world might be more than it appears. It was written by Paul Williams and Kenneth Asher. Williams was one of the most successful songwriters of the 1970s, having written songs for Barbra Streisand, Three Dog Night, and The Carpenters. His collaboration with Henson on The Muppet Movie produced a song that received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song. Jim Henson performed Kermit throughout his life and died in 1990. His son Brian Henson described hearing Rainbow Connection as the experience of hearing his father's philosophy of life compressed into 3 minutes of music.
The Rainbow Connection, the lover.
Number 10. Car Wash by Rose Royce. Car Wash, 1976. Car Wash was a 1976 comedy film about the workers and customers of a Los Angeles car wash, directed by Michael Schultz, and featuring an ensemble cast that included Richard Pryor, George Carlin, and a large group of character actors playing the car wash employees. It was not a film with major commercial expectations. It was produced on a modest budget and aimed at a specific urban audience. The music supervisor was Norman Whitfield, one of Motown's most significant producer-writers, responsible for some of the label's biggest hits, including Papa Was a Rollin' Stone and I Heard It Through the Grapevine. Whitfield assembled a group of musicians and singers as Rose Royce and produced the soundtrack. The title song, Car Wash, reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in October 1976 and spent 1 week at the top, simultaneously reaching number 1 on the R&B singles chart. The song is pure, high-energy, densely arranged funk pop, built on a groove that communicates the specific mechanical rhythm of the work it describes. It received a Grammy Award nomination. Rose Royce continued recording after the film, but their greatest commercial success was always connected to that single. Car Wash was sampled and covered and remixed in subsequent decades, and Christina Aguilera and Missy Elliott recorded a version for the 2004 animated film Shark Tale. Number 9. How Deep Is Your Love by the Bee Gees, Saturday Night Fever, 1977. The Saturday Night Fever soundtrack produced more than one era-defining single, but How Deep Is Your Love had a different quality from the high-energy dance tracks that dominated the album. It was a ballad, quiet, slow, built on harmonic richness that the Bee Gees' falsetto style made particularly distinctive. The Bee Gees had been recording since the 1960s and had rebuilt their commercial profile in the mid-1970s through their work with producer Arif Mardin. which moved them toward the soulful pop disco direction that would dominate Saturday Night Fever. How Deep Is Your Love was written during the soundtrack sessions and reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, spending 3 weeks at the top. It received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song. The Bee Gees were nominated alongside 2 of their own songs from the same film, Stayin' Alive and Night Fever, competing against themselves for the same award. All 3 lost to You Light Up My Life.
How deep is your love? Is your love how deep?
Number 8. Nobody Does It Better by Carly Simon, The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977.
Nobody does it better.
The James Bond franchise had been producing theme songs since Dr. No introduced the Bond theme in 1962, and by 1977, the expectation was firmly established. A big-voiced singer, an orchestral production from John Barry or his peers, a lyric that touched on themes of danger, desire, and mystery. Nobody Does It Better fulfilled and slightly subverted this formula. Carly Simon, who had become one of the most significant singer-songwriters of the early 1970s, through albums like No Secrets and the career-defining You're So Vain, brought to the song a quality of genuine romantic warmth that the typical Bond theme didn't quite have. The lyric, written by Carol Bayer Sager, was addressed directly and personally to the spy, an expression of admiration that was both affectionate and slightly rueful. It had the vulnerability of a real feeling rather than the calculated seductiveness of a typical Bond song. The music was composed by Marvin Hamlisch, who had won multiple Academy Awards for his work on The Sting and The Way We Were in the early 1970s. Nobody Does It Better reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100. Its only obstacle to #1 was You Light Up My Life, which was occupying the top position for much of the autumn of 1977. It received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song.
Nobody does it better.
Number 7. Gonna Fly Now by Bill Conti, Rocky, 1976. Rocky opened in November 1976 and became one of the most commercially successful films of the year. Sylvester Stallone, who had written the screenplay and insisted on playing the title role, produced a film about an underdog Philadelphia boxer that won the Academy Award for Best Picture at the 1977 ceremony. The film's emotional power was inseparable from its music. Bill Conti was a relatively unknown composer when he was hired for Rocky. What he wrote was Gonna Fly Now, a piece that built from a quiet early morning melody into a full orchestral and choral statement of determination and possibility. The sequence in the film in which Rocky runs through Philadelphia, up the steps of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and turns at the top with his arms raised is one of the most famous images in American cinema, and its emotional impact depends entirely on the music building underneath it. Gonna Fly Now reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in July 1977 and spent 1 week at the top. It received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song. The Rocky Steps, the flight of stairs outside the Philadelphia Museum of Art, became a tourist destination. A bronze statue of Rocky was eventually installed near the base of the stairs. The music and the image had become as much Philadelphia as the Liberty Bell. Number 6. Live and Let Die by Wings, Live and Let Die, 1973.
Live and let die.
When the producers of the James Bond franchise asked Paul McCartney to write the theme for Live and Let Die, they were taking a calculated risk. McCartney was one of the most successful musicians in the world. But the Bond theme had historically been performed by established big band singers, Shirley Bassey, Tom Jones, Shirley Eaton's sister, not by rock musicians. The brief was the same as always: grand, dramatic, dangerous. McCartney and Linda McCartney wrote the song together, and the result was something that had no real precedent in the Bond catalog. It begins with a lush, romantic ballad, piano, strings, McCartney's voice, and then erupts into hard rock, the tempo doubling, the energy entirely transformed. The shift between the two sections is one of the most dramatic structural moves in the history of the franchise. George Martin, who had produced the Beatles throughout the 1960s, arranged and produced the track. Live and Let Die received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Song, the first Bond theme to receive the nomination. Wings performed it live on tour throughout the 1970s. It became a permanent part of McCartney's live set and remains there to this day. The song reached number 2 in the United States and number 9 in the United Kingdom.
Live and let die.
Number 5. Knockin' on Heaven's Door by Bob Dylan, Pat Garrett, and Billy the Kid, 1973.
Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door.
Sam Peckinpah's revisionist Western Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, starring James Coburn as the lawman and Chris Christopherson as the outlaw, was not a box office success. It was poorly received on its initial release in a version Peckinpah considered butchered by the studio. A restored director's cut released in 1988 was more favorably received. But the film produced one of Dylan's most enduring songs.
Knocking on heaven's door.
Dylan wrote Knockin' on Heaven's Door specifically for a scene in which a deputy is dying of a gunshot wound, and it plays quietly underneath the deputy's final minutes. The song is one of the simplest Dylan ever recorded. 2 verses, a chorus that repeats, a melody built on 4 chords, a lyric about the sensation of dying and the approach of something that might be rest or might be oblivion. Its simplicity is the source of its power and its longevity. The song reached number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1973. It has been covered hundreds of times, most notably by Eric Clapton, by Roger Waters on Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, and by Guns N' Roses, whose version from the Use Your Illusion 2 album introduced it to a new generation in 1991. The Guns N' Roses version charted higher than Dylan's original in multiple countries. Dylan has continued performing it in concert for more than 50 years.
Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door.
Number 4. Superfly by Curtis Mayfield, Superfly, 1972.
You're gonna make
Gordon Parks Jr.'s Superfly was a blaxploitation film about a Harlem drug dealer named Youngblood Priest who is trying to make one last big score before getting out of the business. The film was independently produced on a budget of approximately $500,000 and grossed over $11 million in the United States, making it one of the most commercially successful independent productions of the era. The soundtrack was written and performed by Curtis Mayfield, a Chicago soul singer and songwriter who had spent the 1960s as the frontman of the Impressions and had launched a successful solo career in 1970. Mayfield was known for his political songwriting. His work with the Impressions had produced some of the most significant soul music of the civil rights era, and his approach to Superfly was similarly political. Where the film glorified its protagonist's lifestyle, Mayfield's soundtrack provided a commentary on it. The music was beautiful, and the words were clear-eyed about the damage the drug trade was doing to the community it was supposed to be celebrating. The soundtrack sold more copies than the film earned at the box office, one of the very few cases in the history of cinema where a soundtrack outsold its accompanying film. Freddie's Dead reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. The title track Superfly reached number 8. The album is now considered one of the defining works of 1970s soul and funk, studied and sampled endlessly in the decades since its release. Number 3. Theme from Shaft by Isaac Hayes, Shaft, 1971.
Who is a man that would risk his neck for his brother, man?
Theme from Shaft won the Academy Award for Best Original Song at the 1972 ceremony, making Isaac Hayes the first African-American to win an Oscar in a non-acting, non-honorary category. The win was a landmark moment in both the history of the Academy Awards and in the history of the recognition of black music within mainstream American entertainment. Hayes had established himself as one of the most significant figures in soul music through his work as a writer and producer for Stax Records, and through his breakthrough solo album, Hot Buttered Soul, in 1969. A record that introduced a new approach to soul production. with longer tracks, elaborate orchestral arrangements, and extended spoken word passages that combined autobiography and seduction in a way nobody else was doing. The Shaft soundtrack extended that approach into a cinematic context. The title theme opens with the wah-wah guitar figure that has become one of the most recognizable sounds in the history of American popular music. A rhythmic pulse that simultaneously established the character's coolness and the film's urban setting. The track reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in November 1971 and stayed there for 2 weeks. It became a defining document of what 1970s soul could be when given the budget and the imagination to explore its possibilities fully.
Who is a man that would risk his neck for his brother, man?
Number 2. You're the One That I Want by Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta, Grease, 1978. If Summer Nights set up the premise of Grease, You're the One That I Want was its resolution, and it became the commercial centerpiece of one of the most successful soundtracks in cinema history. The song was not in the original stage musical. It was written by John Farrar, Olivia Newton-John's longtime collaborator and friend, specifically for the film. The film's conclusion required a musical moment that resolved the central question of whether Sandy and Danny could find a way to be together that worked for both of them. The solution the film proposed, Sandy's physical transformation into someone Danny's greaser friends would approve of, was controversial then, and has been more controversial in retrospect. But You're the One That I Want, with its urgent opening vocal and its irresistible momentum, made the resolution feel emotionally satisfying in the moment in a way that pure logic couldn't quite. The single reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the summer of 1978 and spent 3 weeks at the top. In the United Kingdom, it spent 9 consecutive weeks at #1, one of the longest chart runs in UK chart history at the time. The Grease soundtrack sold approximately 28 million copies worldwide. Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta became, for that specific summer, the most commercially successful musical pairing in American popular music. Number 1. Stayin' Alive by the Bee Gees, Saturday Night Fever, 1977. The Saturday Night Fever soundtrack is the best-selling movie soundtrack of all time. Over 40 million copies worldwide, a Grammy for Album of the Year in 1978, and a place in the Library of Congress National Recording Registry. At the center of everything was Stayin' Alive. The film starred John Travolta as Tony Manero, a young man from Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, whose talent on the disco dance floor provided the only dignity available to him in a life that offered very little of it. Stayin' Alive played over the film's opening sequence, Tony walking through Brooklyn in his white suit, his strut timed precisely to the beat in what became one of the most imitated images in American cinema. The Bee Gees wrote and recorded the Saturday Night Fever material in a concentrated burst at Criteria Recording Studios in Miami in 1977. Stayin' Alive was built on a rhythm that matched its subject, the daily act of survival in a city that was not especially interested in your survival. The falsetto harmonies of Barry, Robin, and Maurice Gibb gave the song its specific texture. Stayin' Alive reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in February 1978 and spent 4 weeks at the top. Its opening bass figure is considered one of the most instantly recognizable phrases in popular music. When British medical researchers went looking for a song with the correct tempo to teach CPR chest compressions, they selected Stayin' Alive, its tempo of approximately 100 beats per minute, close to ideal. The song about staying alive turned out to be genuinely useful for keeping people alive. If any of these took you straight back to the movie theater, hit the like button and subscribe. There are more playlists and deep dives like this one waiting for you.